that old rugged cross, I will ever be true. It's shame and reproach gladly bear. And he'll call me someday to a home far away, where glory forever I'll share. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross, to my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
Web Dog, y'all may be seated. Richard's going to lead us in Nothing But the Blood. Page number 40.
I got a hair in my... What can wash away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. What can make me whole again? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fountain I know, nothing but the blood of Jesus. For my pardon, this I see, nothing but the blood of Jesus. For my cleansing, this I plead, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Come on, sing. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fount I know, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Nothing can for sin atone, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Not of good that I have done, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fount I know, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Sing it. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fount I know, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Amen. Give him
Here's
a hand
Johnny.
clap of praise.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Awesome. So glad everybody came. I'm John Mason Smith. I'm on staff here at the Flora-Bama Church. It was going to rain, but it's not raining now. Woo! We lucked out. Hey, I want to say hello, too, to all our remote ministry friends that are watching online this week. We have hundreds that do that every week, so that's kind of a neat thing. Hey, folks, I'm John Mason Smith, the remote ministry team here at the church at the Flora-Bama. Thanks for coming by tuning in. Hey, we're going to give you an opportunity to give back to our ministry online. even though you're not here, you can still really help us reach people for Jesus and help them follow Him. And the way you do that is you go to our website at centralonline.tv, click the Give button, and then choose the Flora-Bama, Florida campus. And that money does come back to us, and then we'll use that to fish for people. You can also help by going to the Flora-Bama.com website, and there choose store. And then find under their shirts these cool, my church is at the Flora-Bama Church. And if you're like in Wisconsin or you're down in Miami, you need to wear this shirt everywhere you go and tell people, come check out this church. This is where you want to be. And then, just to let you know, that money will also come back to help our ministry. Thanks for all you do, and we want to help you as well. If you have a prayer concern or prayer need, we will help pray over those. All you have to do is send that to us at our email address, florabama@centralonline.tv, and we will be in prayer with you and for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy today's service. Hey, those first-time visitors, I'm going to do a contest. Now, the regulars know this contest is coming. You didn't. But it's a T-shirt contest, and I know I'm at the Flora-Bama, but we're just giving one away. Okay? Brandon's holding one up. It says, My Church, the Flora-Bama. And if you want to win that shirt, all you got to do is convince me, and you have to convince me, that you're further away than every other first-time visitor. And the way you do that is you shout it out, and then I use my mad geography skills to zero in and determine that you came from further than everyone else. So if you think you've never been here before, caveat, I mean, not just this year, ever, and you think you're far away, yell out where you're from right now. Huntsville, Alabama. Cleveland. You live here. Oh, them. Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, really? I don't believe it. Iowa. All right, got the Cornhuskers. Going once. Anybody? Nobody from California? None? Last chance. You got to yell. I can't hear anybody. I hear like a lot of. Cleveland's not further than Iowa. You might keep hearing Cleveland.
Are you sure, John?
Is that what they're saying? I can't hear anybody. They say this contest is harder than it looks. Chicago. All right. Just based on that Herb is from Illinois, I'm going to give it to Iowa. Hey. All right. Chances are there are people here you don't know. Why don't you stand up, get to know somebody, and give them a big sweaty hug.
All right, you may be seated. Open up your honky-tonk hymnal to 106. I am free. If you have Jesus, you are free indeed.
Amen.
I didn't hear
I am free to love.
I am free to dance.
I am free to dance.
I am free to live for you.
I am free to live for you.
I am free.
Yes, I am free.
I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Through you the blind will see. Through you the mute will sing. Through you the dead will rise. Through you all hearts will praise. Through you the darkness flees. Through you my heart screams, I am free.
I am free.
I am free.
I am free. Come on.
I am free to run.
Say it. I am free to run.
I am free to dance.
I am free to dance.
I am free to live for you.
I am free to live for you.
I am free.
I am free.
I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Through you the kingdom comes. Through you the battle's won. Through you I'm not afraid. Through you the price is paid. Through you there's victory. Because of you I am free.
I am free.
I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Cause I am free to love.
I am free to love.
I am free to dance.
I am free to dance.
I am free to live for you.
I am free to live for you.
I am free.
I am free.
I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Yes, indeed. We got one more for you. I went and saw Foreigner over at the Hard Rock in Biloxi probably a couple months ago. And this song got stuck in my head, and I decided to rewrite it for Jesus a little bit, so y'all just have patience with us. Time to get it right. I got down on my knees till I saw the light. He filled my eyes with that holy vision. No disguise with that holy vision. as long as I let the Holy Spirit in me lead. It's your time for salvation, your time to live it. He'll bless all of your years, every single minute. He'll fill your eyes with that holy vision. No disguise with that holy vision. Ooh, it always gets through to me. It's always new to me. The holy vision gets the best of me. The best of me. Fill your eyes with that holy vision. No disguise, that holy vision. Ooh, it always gets through to me. It's always new to me. The holy vision gets the best of me. The best of me.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. Everybody doing good? We're so glad you all are here. My name is Dan. If this is your very first time or we haven't met, I'm the pastor here at the Flora-Bama. Thanks for hanging out with us this weekend, a warm weekend. I can remember, I personally, I did not grow up in church. Anybody grow up? You grew up in church, going to church. How many guys did not grow up in church? It wasn't church wasn't a thing for us growing up, but I do remember this one moment where Mom took us to church, and the preacher, who I can't remember a whole lot of what was said, and I didn't understand the songs. There's lots of these and thous in the songs, and lots of these and thous in the Bible that he was reading from, but I remember the sermon was on the 10 Commandments. Now, at the time, the only thing I knew about the 10 Commandments had something to do with about this 3-hour-long movie that was on television once a year, and which was not very accurate, apparently, because in Sunday school, I kept answering questions, and the lady was like, no, that's not really in the Bible. And then okay. She asked another question. Something about, this happened. And I said, yeah, that was his sister's brother. They were hanging out talking. No, that's not what really happened. So what I took away from this first real experience, hearing a sermon and someone opening the Bible and teaching from it, and the 10 Commandments, other than this really bad CGI movie scene where God writes on these tablets and things like that, was, man, there's a bunch of rules. I'm not sure what they all mean, but I definitely know there's some things I should not be doing, and if I do, bad things happen. Right? Bad things happen. These are the big 10. And so over the years, as I have thought about those 10 commandments and what they meant and where they came from, most conversations surrounding those 10 commandments are conversations like, yeah, I know the 10 commandments, but to be honest, I don't know that all of us could even recite all 10, you know what I mean? And there's arguments on where they should be put up. Should they be put up, in certain places for people to see, or should we take them down? And there's votes on that kind of stuff, and big arguments break out. If we take down the 10 commandments, it's like kicking God out of the Supreme Court. It's on and on conversations, or people don't want to talk about it because a conversation about those 10 commandments could bring up the fact that I may have broken several over the last several days or several weeks, or for sure at some point in my lifetime. So the 10 Commandments, though a lot of people, even if you today are not a devoted Christ follower, the church is not a thing for you, even as a kid, not being a Christ follower, I knew what the 10 Commandments were. But over the years, what I have found out is I was sorely mistaken that first day hearing about the 10 Commandments, and my perception was of what they were, because to me, how they were presented, or how they're often presented, as either like the holy grail of all of Christianity, or they're just these 10 rules that seemingly, I guess, are the most important to God, these 10. But in order to have a conversation about these 10 commandments, the big 10, right? The 10 that we usually talk about when we talk about commandments, we really have to have a conversation about why God chose those 10. Now, I wasn't there, but my assumption is it wasn't as if God had 100 of these rules that he thought were really important and drew the first 10 and those became the 10 commandments. Or he only had so much room on these stone tablets, so he was hoping for 12, but he ran out of room at 10. I'm assuming that it was a very intentional conversation that God was having with this group of people. And so we can't really talk about the 10 Commandments with talking about why they were written and the group of people that they were written to and for, which opens up a whole other conversation about why they were written down and why they ended up in the Bible and why the Bible in the first place. So it's a kind of a complicated conversation, which would take hours and weeks and probably months to unpack that conversation. But here's what I do know, that we've got this amazing book. We call it a book, the Bible, which is actually a compilation of 66 books and letters and poems and songs and confessions and accounts written by very real people living in very real communities and real locations in very real times with certain cultures and governments and religions, in the same way that if you and I were to write down some things happening in the world around us, it would be specific to a certain time and a certain place, and you're a certain person with a certain perspective. But we often take the humanity out of the Bible, because if you look at a Bible, we have Bibles that we give away, so if you need one, by the way, today, make sure you stop at the info tables on your way out if you don't have one. But right on the front of that Bible, it says Holy Bible, so it's like, holy crap, I gotta back up. I got to be a little careful. It's almost like we take the humanity out of the Bible and forget it was written by very real people. And it's an amazing collection of stories about fear and about love, in the same way that much of our lives have pieces of fear and love. And it's stories about war and about peace. People writing about heartbreak, slavery, forgiveness, rejection, acceptance. And so what we tend to do by throwing the word holy on there is we kind of stand back from it and it loses its humanity. And another mistake that we make, which sounds kind of strange, but we make the mistake of saying that this is the Christian's book. That's not the reason it was written. So it could be for a bunch of people who call themselves Christians. This isn't a book about being a Christian. It's a book about being human. It's full of humanity. Now, as a Christian, if you would label yourself a Christian, you're doing that because you're a devoted follower of Christ, God's Son Jesus, who the Bible speaks about, and his heavenly Father, the one true God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. So I get why it's been adopted and called the Christian's holy book. But it wasn't started out thousands of years ago, people writing stuff down, hoping one day it would all get put together so that these people gathering in the church would have a book to read. That wasn't the idea of the book. In fact, how it all kind of started, the reason some people wrote some stuff down was because there was this group of people, these Israelites or the Hebrew people, that believed with all of their heart in the one true God, who they called Yahweh or Jehovah, God, and they chose to follow him, while much of the communities and the people around were worshiping random gods. And so if the sun, if it is beautiful outside at one point and then the rain comes and it's starting to flood, well, we've got to pray to something somewhere up there to get this rain to stop and the sun to come out. So like the god Ra was invented at one point in human history to pray the sun god. And then when the sun's out too long and it's not raining, and so we got to try to figure out how to get some rain here, well, let's pray to the rain god of whoever. And so the creation of these other gods, but these Israelites, for much of their history, really stay committed to the creator, Yahweh, Jehovah, God, the creator of the universe. Now, at a point in these people's lives, they became slaves to another group of people. And those people were called the Egyptians. The Egyptians were ruled by a kind of a dictating leader named Pharaoh. Pharaoh, by the way, who was believed to be like fulfilling the will, through his decision making in his life, fulfilling the will of the goddess Mayet. So Mayet had a plan to keep universal harmony in Egypt. And the way that this goddess did that was through Pharaoh. And so you don't question Pharaoh, because in questioning Pharaoh, who are you questioning? The goddess Mayet. And that doesn't go well if you question the goddess. Death is imminent if you start going down that path. And so because Pharaoh, by will of the goddess Mayet, was always looking out for universal harmony in Egypt, what started to happen was power became the number one way to get universal harmony. These people are, they're kind of throwing shade in our direction. We don't like them. They don't like us. Well, how do we keep universal harmony? We destroy them so we can be happier and have some more land, and we can put our foot on their necks, and then they can do what we want them to do. And so war and violence and anger and hate and superiority became a common thing among that community, to the point where they enslaved another race of people, the Israelites, the Hebrews. And for several hundred years, for generation and generation, these Hebrew people were under the oppression of Pharaoh, but technically they were told they were being oppressed. Really, this is only the will of Mayet, the goddess, that through whom, Pharaoh, through whom her will, universal harmony, is being activated and happens on the earth. But then there's this other moment, because for those hundreds and hundreds of years, these Hebrew people were praying to God to deliver us from slavery. Deliver us from slavery. God, please send a deliverer. And there was this moment in the history of this group of people where God delivered them, as the Bible says, out of the hands of Pharaoh. Through these miraculous signs and wonders that happened, this group of people, estimated, some historians believe somewhere between 1 and 3 million of them, exited Exodus, on this exodus from Egypt. So they left, singing, cheering. Pharaoh let them go. And then there's stories following that about crossing seas and God working miracles, feeding them out in the desert. water and bread from heaven and these amazing, amazing miracles. But on this journey, not long after they leave, this group of people began to write down that God was speaking to them. God was speaking to them as a father would speak to his children. And those stories got written down and shared and passed on, and father to son and mother to daughter, and then generation upon generation until it was put down in manuscripts. And a lot of it's what we call Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Bible, often referred to as the Pentateuch or the Torah. And within that context of them exiting on this mass exodus away from Egypt, it is said, as the story goes, that God spoke to a man named Moses. And in that moment, God laid out for them a new way to live. See, for hundreds and hundreds of years, they were treated as less than human, as slaves, beat like animals, like work animals. They were worked 7 days a week, sun up to sundown, oftentimes working with less than what they really needed. They were in survival mode as a people group, trying to get through the day, doing everything that they can to survive and not make Pharaoh too mad that he starts killing in the name of Mayet, the goddess. And so there was this moment where God is reminding them, hey, don't forget, I'm the one that delivered you out of Egypt. Now, before we go into exactly what he says, what I want to do is I want to fast forward the story. I want to fast forward the story to just a couple thousand years ago when Jesus, who is claiming to be this God's son, is speaking to a group of religious leaders. Now, if you've got your program, you go ahead and open it up. If you don't have a yellow program, you slipped in somehow without getting one, just lift up your hand. We'll get you one. Jesus, who is this God's son, claiming to be, shares with a group of people. Some of them were expert religious people. It says this, one of them, an expert in religious law, so this is one of the teachers at the church, tried to trap him with this question, Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? Jesus replied, you must love your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now here's the key of what Jesus said. The entire law, all the rules, all the regulations, all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. What Jesus is saying is, hey, you want to start talking about the 10 Commandments or the other commandments, the law that were given those thousands of years ago. Before you can talk about those, just remember that it's really all about, if you were to sum it up, it was about loving God and loving people. Loving God fully and loving others selflessly. And so before we can even talk about any commandment given by God, we have to remember that the whole thing is rooted and grounded in love. That these rules were not rules that God chose to beat people over the head with, which is what often they're described as. These are the big 10. If you just don't do these, don't. Well, Jesus kind of flipped it around and said, well, let me tell you the do part of it. If you do these things, if you'll not do those things, in essence, you're going to be loving God and loving others, which is the fulfillment of all that God is asking us to do. Now, those are big umbrella statements, and they're not always easy to live out. But if he said, you want to boil it down, you want to get to the baseline of the baseline, love God with everything you've got and love others selflessly. So as we dig in over the next couple weeks to these big 10 commandments, we have to start with this is all grounded in love, which some of them don't sound like, but they are. And so Moses, it was written down in the book of Deuteronomy, right there in your program. Now, if you want to check these out for yourself, there's two places you can look in the Bible. You can check Exodus, which is the second book of the Bible, Genesis and then Exodus. Exodus chapter 20 spells out all 10 of the commandments. Now, Deuteronomy is the fifth and final book in the first five called the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So Genesis, the first book, the second book, Exodus, chapter 20, or Deuteronomy, the fifth book, chapter 5, spells them out. And here's how it starts. He spoke to me. This is Moses saying, God said something to me, and I'm going to pass his words on to you. So whatever comes next, Moses is claiming God himself said these things to me so I could tell them to you. This is what he said. I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt. We just kind of went over that. The place of your slavery. God is reminding them, hey, don't forget, it wasn't that long ago you were slaves. Don't ever forget what I've done. Commandment number 1, you must not have any other God but me. And we're going to jump right into commandment number 2. Commandment number 2, you must not make for yourself any idol of any kind. For an image of anything in heaven or in earth or in the sea, you must not bow down or worship them. It's a very interesting first way. It sounds a little egotistical. You know what I mean? Hey, there's going to be lots of opportunities. Hey, remember the Egyptians while they were creating all those gods? Matter of fact, most historians believe at any given time, the Egyptian people were worshiping anywhere between 400 gods and 2,000 individual separate gods. That's all. How do you keep track of 2,000 gods? You know, I'll be honest with you. I have some struggles sometimes obeying one. These jokers had about 2,000 at a time, trying to appease them and please them, because the general idea was God is mad, or the gods are mad, and your job is to make them happy. That's a tough task, which is where sacrifice and all kinds of crazy, sick and perverted things came into being, was to do it to show these gods out there somewhere that we're serious and we're devoted and we need you to show your favor upon us. But it's a very interesting two start outs. First one is, you shall have no other gods but me. Don't get caught up in the God of this and the God of that. There's one true God. Stay true. And then also, besides that, not to mention don't have any other gods, but don't start making for yourself with your own two hands some kind of God that you can see so that you can worship. Very interesting, first two, the first couple statements. Now, if you just read those as you and I would just read those, and we don't understand where these people were coming from, it just looks like God is just after his name being worshipped and his chest being puffed out and him having like a really big ego. But here's what starts to happen. Here's what was happening in Egypt. These pharaohs and kings and religious priests would create these gods with their own two hands. Maybe a group of people that would come up with the idea that there's a sun god or a rain god or a fertility god. There's even old records of beer gods and wine gods and songs written to these, you know. I'm sure those were written in a state of a complete inebriation, you know. Hey, let's write a song, woo, you know. So they began to make these gods and then in turn worship the very thing that they themselves created, which creates a very weird kind of self-worship. Look what I have made. We're going to worship what I have done. Look what I have created. So in essence, though they were worshiping the whoever god, the goddess, the god of whoever, in turn it became kind of a self-worship. You will worship the God that I have created. And if you don't, we're going to take some serious action. And so God was trying to pull them away from that because he knew us. And he knew for hundreds of years being in that culture, that would be the reflex. It would be kind of what you do. Well, now we're out here in the middle of nowhere. We've got to build a community. We need some sun. Hey, remember what those guys were doing? They were worshiping the sun god. Yeah, let's start doing that. It's kind of what they knew. It's kind of generation after generation, the way that they were raised, watching it all happen and unfold around them. And sometimes they prayed at the right time and the sun would come out. So it looked very miraculous. And then there were these other times where they needed water, and then they remembered the Egyptians praying and doing whatever rituals they did, and then it actually rained. And so it looked like almost that this whole thing actually worked. And so God, interestingly enough, starts out these two commandments by saying, hey, don't forget about slavery. I rescued you away from that lifestyle. I rescued away from that mess. Because God knew that what can happen, it happens to me still to this day, is I can, with my own two hands, create something. And that could be the career path that you or I have chosen, or the amount of money that we have invested in saved, or the business that we have, the job that we go to. And we create this world with our own two hands, and then in turn, though we would not admit it, what happens a lot of time is that thing, whatever that thing is, tends to get our undivided attention and our love and our heart and our passion, and it gets a piece of us in a way that some people would say it's like worshiping a God with all the attention and adoration and love and enthusiasm that we give to these things. And so the Bible would use the word right here in this second commandment. It says, don't make for yourself an idol of any kind, something that gets your worship over God. And then so what ends up happening is I kind of look at it like this. I'm very good at building boxes in my life. And what I mean by that is this, that I've got this career that I've chosen, and in that goes the skills that I've learned and the schooling that I went to and how I've developed myself and learned and grown over the years, and the wisdom and the history of this thing that I have. So I put it in there, and then what I tend to do is I spend the rest of my time trying to protect and fortify the walls of this thing. And we could say career, we could say a relationship, whatever it is that we have kind of done with our own two hands, that we have done ourselves, once we've built this box, we spend a lot of time protecting it. Our opinions end up going in this box, and we protect those opinions with everything we've got. And then we spend the rest of the time trying to defend and protect and keep pure what we've built. And so we then become enslaved to the ideas and the career and the businesses and the security and our happiness. We become enslaved to the thing that we have created. And what God was trying to say to these people is, remember how much you hated slavery? Don't start building idols in your life. Now, literally, they were talking about bowing down to, statues. But God was also making it clear that you can get back into slavery just as quick without ever having a taskmaster. When we start to build idols in our life that matter more than the God that has given us breath and that has released us from slavery, from sin, we become a slave. I see this happen in religion all the time. And you can pick your favorites or denomination or religion or church thinking, and we start to talk about with this pureness, we would love to gather together, this group of people on a mission. Let's gather together and worship God, and we love doing it together. So let's get a building where we can gather together, or a tent of some. We can gather together and spend time worshiping this God. But then there's got to be some decisions made, and so we make decisions about songs or chairs, and we make decisions about signs, and we get in arguments about names of the church that's going to go on the billboard, out in the kiosk out in front, and pretty soon all the opinions end up in this box. And then we start holding that box up and saying, this is the right way and the correct way. And those guys down the street, oh, God bless them, but they don't really know the right way. You know what I mean? And so then we break off and we give different names to different churches. And really, it's all because of the fact that we've got different stuff in our box. And so we spend all this time protecting the box and trying to build stronger walls in that box. And making sure that if anyone were to mess with the stuff in the box, they will find themselves outside of the box.
Amen.
Yeah, it's dangerous, but we would never say it, but we start lifting that thing up and it becomes more important than God himself. Now, we would never say that. So then when God or Jesus is brought up, you know what it ends up being about? How much God loves our box. Compared to, those guys are great and hopefully they'll get to heaven, but if they were on our side, I don't know. And this doesn't just happen in religion, it happens in my life. And I think if we're really honest, sometimes it can happen in all of our lives that we start trusting and loving things, happiness or comfort in the future, the security, the idea of a career that's going to end with exactly what we need it to end with. And we start putting those things in a box and we start lifting those things up. And they weren't as important at first, but now that we've got them, we've got to protect them. And pretty soon we become enslaved to the very thing that we're building. The very career, I've watched amazing careers become the apple of the eye of the person in the family, and the whole family lose out on time and love and support. I've watched security, the idea that in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or 40 years or 50 years from now, the idea of security, that our family is going to be safe and secure because of these investments, of me working this and doing this, become an idol to the point where they have to protect this thing so much that everyone around them loses, so that in 20 years everyone can be happy and safe. And then we've got to spend time protecting it and guarding it. And so God is laying out this new way to live. Here's a group of people that were in slavery for hundreds of years, and God is begging with them, don't go back into slavery. Do not build for yourself a life that you have to so hard fortify the walls and protect and guard, and it becomes the thing that you love the most, that you worship. Now, we wouldn't say that, right? Good church people, we wouldn't worship that stuff, but at the end of the day, we reserve our best affections and our best passions and our best loves for that thing that we made with our own hands, and it's become an idol. And God is saying that is not the way to freedom. It's a way back into slavery, and you just left. So don't go back. Do you see the difference in looking at it that way than just some rule God picked out of a hat? See, it was love that caused God to choose those first two. It was love. You were enslaved and it broke my heart, and so I got you out. Please don't go back in. Please don't go back. Now, they weren't going to go back to Egypt, but they were going to create for themselves, once again, a taskmaster that they create themselves. And a life that they had to spend all their energy and passions and resources protecting. And God is saying that's not the way to freedom. Let me show you a new way to live. And I don't know for you what you've placed inside the box in your life. For me, I've got my opinions that I throw in there, most of which I think are really good. Obviously, that's why I put them in here. And I want a great future for my family, and I want them to be secure, and I love what I do. And I pour a ton of time and energy into doing what I do, but may I never get to the place where this life I created becomes the thing that I worship. Because in doing that, I'll do everything I can to protect it, and then I become a slave to it. And you and I would never, ever enter into a slave-master-slave relationship with anybody, would we? No, if someone approached you and said, hey, I got a great idea, and he lays out the idea of slavery, you're not going to enter into that on your own. And yet we create for ourselves opportunities to do the same thing. Is there anything that you hold up as, how does he say it? Do not make for yourself an idol of any kind. Is there anything, question I have to ask myself all the time, is there anything that I love so much that I've created in my life, or that I've become enslaved to it, that I hold it up and it receives more love than the God who gives me breath and life? Do you? Do you have anything in your life that you have spent so much time building and now you're obsessed with protecting and fortifying those walls, and it's your magnificent obsession? And everyone around you knows it, but you tend to seem blind to it. And the reason I say that is because that's me. It's not easy for me to admit that I've got some things in my life that I hold up higher and that I've been enslaved to at times. I'm the one that doesn't see it. Others can see it. Sometimes it's me that misses it. God is offering you and I a different way to live. Free from the slavery of things and being attached to things so strongly that we have to spend the rest of our lives protecting it. But instead, he offers us a new path to worship. Instead of all those gods that we create, to worship a one true God who has brought us from darkness to light. And that is a life of freedom that he offers you and he offers me today. Can I pray for you this morning? Father, I am humbled by the idea that you begin with love. It is your driving force. It is the way in which you communicate to us. And God, I am so grateful that you have laid out for us a new way, a different way to live. And we may not have walked out of 400 years of slavery, but God, you have taken our lives from darkness to light. God, may we never willingly head back into slavery by creating a life, an idol, that we become enslaved to. And so God, thank you for offering us freedom to worship you, freedom to trust you, freedom to love you and to love others without the attachment, the enslavery to the things that we build for ourselves. Lord, for myself, for all of us today that may have a box of things that we are really holding up way too high, it's become an idol. I pray today would be a turning point in our lives. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. And the Flora-Bama family said, amen.
Thank you, Dan. Everybody stand with me here. Feel better. Hey, all you first-time guests, yeah, we do this every Sunday. We'd love to get connected with you. We have little gifts for you on those info tables. Stop by and get those. We say this every week, and it's very true. If God is for us, who can be against us? We'll see you next week.
Some bright morning when this life is over, I'll wait to that home God's still so. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. Hallelujah, fly away. I'll fly away. just a few more.